It is miraculous how quickly the FUM balloon made it across the Atlantic Ocean this week. Um, Coming from Samburu and Turkana at 8 o'clock on Sunday evening, local time, flying over most of Africa and then dodging storms in the Atlantic and coming to rest safely in the parking lot of FUM on Quaker Hill um, Conference Center land, and guided in by that brand new flat roof that we installed on the FUM office building a couple months ago. And the pilot said they were very happy to be on firm ground finally and not floating around. It becomes arduous when you're trying to fight the jet stream and travel so many miles in such a short amount of time. We're glad you are here. Welcome to the stop in Richmond, Indiana. And if you have been a part of these in the past, we're going to be a little different today because um, the Richmond office is a little different. We scheduled these for an introduction of who and then a where, and our where is all the same, and so we'll just do a little bit different, and each of us will take a piece of the program this evening. The Richmond office has 6 employees who have offices in that building, and we do a lot. We get a lot done, and not as a way to pat ourselves on the back, but it is when I take the time to think about what gets done, what moves out of that office. It is a good amount of work that 6 people do on behalf of the yearly meetings in North America and across the world. And so we want to give you a glimpse of what it is we do. I was going to say and why we do it. We might get a little bit of why in there, but and how we go about our business. The emphasis for this evening's stop is to think about the general fund. These are also, along with being informative, they are fundraising tools that we're using this summer. And the general fund is the non-exciting sort of backbone of what FUM does. It is not on the ground missions. It's not on the ground ministry. It is often administrative. It is often, writing policy, conducting interviews, and sort of governing the work of FUM. But it is essential to the programs that happen within FUM everywhere we are at. So Dan is going to introduce our first speaker.
So our first speaker is Carla J., who is FUM's coordinator of global ministries. And although about 5 minutes ago we had a panic moment where neither of us could remember what she actually does, in fact, she does a great deal. One of the primary ways that you might interface with Carla is because she's responsible for tracking donations that come in for global ministries, for our various ministry partners in the ministries that we directly supervise, and she's responsible for making sure they get where they're intended to go. She's also responsible for creating the living letters trips that we make, either the planned trips or if someone decides that they want to go volunteer at Ramallah for 2 weeks or at Friends Theological College for 2 weeks. She sets up those trips also. She's she does all of our translating from Spanish to English, also from English to Spanish for that matter. And she's recently become much more involved in Latino ministries, which is to say that FUM has been more involved in Latino ministries since we now actually have someone who speaks Spanish on the staff. And she's also involved in fundraising for global ministries. And while she looks like a relative youngster in comparison to most of the rest of the staff, She's actually been translating for her father, who is a Quaker pastor, since she was 9 years old. So she basically has 30 years ministry experience, and in that regard, puts me to shame. So, Carla, it's up to you now.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, friends. I am so excited that we are here and um, giving you a little bit of an idea of what we do here in Richmond. Um, a lot of people don't think that the exciting parts of the ministries happen in Richmond, but I do think that they do happen here. It's exciting to come here to the office every day and to see um, other staff members that are passionate about the work we do around the world. I'm going to be sharing a presentation, and this is the first time I'm sharing from Canva, so hopefully it works. All right, I think it'll work. All right, so like Dan said, I am in charge of like keeping track of donations, in charge of the administrative part of global ministries. Um, but talking about Excel sheets and talking about calendars and deadlines, that's not too exciting. So I'm going to be focusing on the Living Letters program and why I think you should come on a Living Letters trip. And I know that some of you have been on these trips much longer than I have, and I'm always excited to hear your stories of your experiences. Um, but here are some reasons of why you should come on a Living Letters trip. Um, it is a journey. It's literally a journey. You have to get on a plane. Here we have pictures of us getting on some airplanes, and over here on what for me would be the right lower side is a group of people being in a bus in Cuba, and I think that this is Sarah Lookabill here. Is that Sarah? Yeah. So this is the we get to be on all kinds of transportation. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture of a horse, but you get to be on all kinds of transportation when you go on these trips. The other thing that you get to do is you get to transport items. For example, here we have these boxes that we're going to Cuba, and at that point, we didn't know if we were going to be able to take those boxes because of the embargo. But thank God we were able to get those boxes. And on our last trip to Cuba, we took over 500 pounds of medical aid. And here we have a picture of us trying to figure out like where we had to be. Um, this is in Miami as well. Um, and just looking at the map and trying to figure out where we would be. So it's a journey. It's an adventure. You are going to be surprised along the way. Um, we get to be in fellowship with friends around the world. Um, in different ways that people um, want to be in fellowship with us, either through receiving us at their home for a meal, or taking us to the beach for a picnic, or just talking to us. Um, we are in fellowship with the rest of friends in the world. Um, Here we have a picture of friends in Palestine talking to each other and just having a good conversation. Here is one of my favorite pictures where I'm taking a picture with friends in Kenya with their kitenge, and they were very excited to show me their dresses and the colorful stamps on their clothing. Up here, we are in Cuba, and we're just hanging out at the beach. So if you like to go to the beach, Cuba might be the type of place that you would like to visit. Um, and we also are visiting children in schools in Kenya. Here are these two pictures visiting kids in Kenya at school. I do have to say that some of these kids in Kenya are some of the most well-behaved kids that I've ever seen or ever encountered. They just were so polite and so well-behaved when we visited them, and I I um I was like, what can we do for our American children to be like some of those Kenyan kids who were just incredibly polite when we arrived there. And then worship, um, you will encounter different types of worship. Here and the first picture here, it's worship in Mexico, the church in Ciudad Victoria. It's a choir singing. Um, and then we see a picture for worship in Palestine, and then in this picture, lovely worship in from Kenya. This is in Turkana, and I do have to say that that was the longest worship service that I've ever attended because it was, and I'm not, and Dan is here, so he won't let me lie. It was between 8 to 9 hours of worship. It was the whole day in the desert. Um, it was beautiful to see all the dancing and all the churches doing their presentations for that church service. Then here we have Cuba, friends in Cuba singing. Um, and one of our newest places of worship, Belize, we see here young people worshiping at the Belize Friends Church. And here, this little one who was actually walking around during the service, but just stood still just for this moment where he noticed that everyone else was praying and he decided to join in on the prayer, and he stood still for that moment, and Dan was able to take that beautiful picture of that Cuban little boy. And then I have here pictures of different meeting houses. So when I used to think of meeting houses when I was a teenager, I would think of like the New England kind of meeting house, a white plain building. But now my idea of meeting houses has completely changed. Anywhere can be a place to worship. Um, we have here the beautiful meeting house at Ramallah, and people standing outside. But we also have this tree here in Turkana, which is also a church, and these are the walls of that church in this picture. Um, Here in this other picture, we see the Cuba, a church in Cuba, and then other churches in Turkana as well. So it always amazes me that how people have found their sacred places and how they can look so different um, from from each other, but nevertheless they are what friends have decided that that's where they are going to um, be in fellowship. That is where their community is going to meet, and that is where they are going to encounter God. And it really doesn't matter what it is. It can be under a tree, it can be a beautiful meeting house in Ramallah. um, the place um where they can encounter God can be anywhere, and that's one of the things about Friends, that we believe that anywhere can be a place to worship God. So when we arrived under that tree, and the reason why they chose that tree was because they had a big enough shade, I felt the presence of God in that place. um and that really became a reality, that anywhere can be a sacred place. um you should go for the landscapes. Over here on the top we have Turkana. It's not very pleasant to be in Turkana, but I think that we should still experience it. A new reality of God was shown to me in Turkana. When in Isaiah we see the verses talking about water and rivers coming out in the desert, and that he will bless us with water. It became real in Turkana. That's a place where they don't see a lot of water. That's a place where they have to walk a long ways to go get water. And scripture became real to me in those places. Um, I can't lie though. I can't say that I did not enjoy this beach in Cuba. One of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. And I've yet to visit Ramallah, but all the pictures and the experiences that I've seen from there um, tell me that there is the divine that we can encounter there as well. And then you never know how you're going to be surprised. We visited Cuba about 2.5 years ago, and when we landed, we were asked if we could be part of a wedding. Colin Saxton was on that trip, and he officiated that wedding. And I think it was like about 3 days 3 days before the wedding when we were asked to be part of the celebration. We got there, and they asked me to be the photographer because their photographer didn't show up. So you will be asked to be part of people's lives as if you were family, um, because we are family in Christ. We might not have seen each other before, but you will be welcomed as if they knew you for many years, as if you were cousins, and just be prepared to be part of people's lives. And then the countries that we visit, or Cuba, we are doing a trip to Cuba every 2 years. Um, Kenya, we are the type of trips that we have there are mostly for individuals. Um, I would like to see a group trip to Kenya, but if you would like to go and volunteer in Kenya, you would like to go to the hospital, or you would like to go to one of the schools, or do a missions trip, Kenya is one of the places that is prepared to be able to receive individuals on a trip. Belize, we are also trying to get group trips to Belize. The last trip we had was last year, friends from Western. Sean went and did some leadership training there. Jamaica, Uganda, Tanzania, and Mexico are also possibilities. So if you're asking yourself, like, oh, what can I go and do in one of these countries? What can I offer? We don't necessarily have to offer anything in particular. You can go and just be part of people's lives. You can smile with them. You can just be there. Many times we think that we have to bring something, that we have to do something, that we have to have a skill, but I think that just visiting and just being with each other is important enough to be able to go on one of these trips. So, if anyone has any questions about living letters, you can always contact me, or you can ask me to give you more information on living letters trips. Thank you.
Next up is Dan Castellan. I get the privilege of introducing Dan to you. You know that Dan is our Director of Communications. Sometimes he's identified as the man who makes our pictures look good. but Dan does much more than edit our photos so they look nice. He is the one who pores over some often really bad writing and works at making it decent writing, um, promoting the efforts of his writing staff, myself included. Dan is not just a communications director. If you know Dan, you know that he is the father to about 50 sheep at his house. These are animals that he cares for like his own children, and they are emblematic of the kind of care that Dan would like to demonstrate to everybody he encounters. Um, I do not like sheep the way Dan likes sheep, and we have ongoing conversations about how stupid sheep are. And
They're
Dan,
not stupid.
yes. And Dan says you can look them in the eye and see how smart they are. And so I give you Dan Castellan, the director of communications and the man who raises smart sheep.
Michael just doesn't know the right sheep is the problem. But about FUM communications, one of the main things that we do through our various vehicles, which are Quaker Life and our weekly e-news publication, um, the brochures that we put out that describe our ministries in various places, our website, in all of those ways, we really are building relationships between people in one part of the world and another part of the world, whether that means building relationships between people in Southwest Ohio and North Carolina, or whether it means building relationships between people in Iowa and people in Palestine. We're really in a way connecting people. And one of the things uh, that's really important to me in our communications is that we are telling a very specific and particular truth. And as local journalism has died, and for that matter, as national journalism has died, I'm sure that you have all noticed that more and more in your newspapers, in the magazines that you may or may not read, you see stock photography. You see photographs that are meant to be generic symbols of something else. You see a picture of, you see an article on parenting, and it is illustrated with photographs that are meant to be any parents. Well, usually they're meant to be middle-class parents, but in general, they're just meant to be any parent, any mother, any father. Um, they're always taken in places that are clean. Nobody ever has scabs or scars. Nobody's clothes are ever ripped or dirty because they're just symbols, and they just want you to understand this. This is a symbol of a father. It's not a real father. It's just a very manufactured image of fathering. And one of the things that we do is that we don't use any stock photos. A lot of aid organizations, non-governmental organizations will use stock photos, and so you'll see a picture of Africa that's just any African. In our photographs, the pictures that you see are always of people who actually work with us or for us. And you may see people over and over again. Carla thinks our pictures are boring because they're always the same people in the same places. But I think that means that they're truthful because they are always the same people and the same places. And I'm going to try to share my screen and point out that we have relationships with these people and we can tell you their names. So this is from Cuba. This is someone in Puerto Padre who's a handyman. And after I just said that we could tell you their names, I can't tell you his name, but I can tell you what he looks like and I can tell you what he can do. The woman right here, I don't know if you can see my arrow or not. But the woman in the wedding picture hiding in the background behind the blue doorway is a pastor in Cuba named Miletus. I can't pronounce it correctly. She is in all of these pictures. This picture is from 2017. This picture's from 2022. This picture's from 2025. We see her over and over uh, because she's part of our FUM family. I have suddenly forgotten this guy's name. Carla, can you help me out?
Yes, Monchi.
Monche is also a handyman. He's cooking fish. He's driving the van. The van broke down about 57 times. He's pouring water into the radiator to try and keep it from overheating, which it turns out it was impossible to do. This is Jorge Luis, who is now the clerk of Cuba Yearly Meeting. He's also a pastor. This picture is from 2017. This picture is from 2017, and two pictures are from 2025. And if you look at any of our pictures of Cuba, you will see pictures of Jorge Luis. This is Guthrie at Giza. This is a picture of Guthrie in 2015 up at the upper right hand. I think it's probably about 2017 or 18 in the middle top. The pictures with the traffic vests are from the time of the last Kenyan election. Some of these are pictures of her working with girls in the girl child education scholarship program. And then I think that this is her looking at a broken down vehicle in Turkana. And you will see pictures of Getry all over the e-news and in all of our brochures. This is John Moru in the top left-hand corner. That's in 2005, and then 2007, and 2019, and 2020, and 2023. This is Carla over the years. I particularly like the one in the middle top where Carla looks exactly like a deer in the headlights because she and I were both working at the 2023 triennial, and it turned out there wasn't a really good plan for how to admit people into the venue. And Carla is at this moment afraid that she is going to be stampeded. She does not know how any of this will work out. And I was on the stairways and therefore safe, but I don't think Carla felt particularly safe in that moment. However, she did survive. And so on the left, you see Carla translating for one of the speakers from Cuba. You see her doing a lot of translating here. I actually have pictures of Carla being involved in FUM work from before either she or I worked for FUM. So I think I had my earliest pictures of Carla are from 2010. When neither of us thought that this is where we would be. This is Kelly Kellum over the years. From before he worked from FUM until now, this moment. And John Moru, again from 2002 up through 2023. I think that this is really one of the strengths of our communication is that it's real. And my colleagues, I guess I'm throwing them under the bus, but my colleagues sometimes get peeved with me because of how strict I am about not using Photoshop to alter reality, and in fact, not doing anything to alter reality in our photos. But we're Quakers, by golly, and we should be telling the truth. And it's one of the things I'm proudest of in our communications, that we do tell the truth. And that if you were to ask us about anything we publish, pretty much, where was this photograph taken? Who is this photograph of? We could tell you. And if you were to say, I'm really fascinated by what this person is doing weaving this basket, we could probably connect you to that person weaving that basket, because we build relationships, our staff builds relationships, and through those of us here in Richmond and the staff who are in other places, you build relationships with the people who are in our communications. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Michael Sherman, who has been our coordinator for North American and Caribbean. Isn't it? No, Carla's introducing him. Not me.
Yeah.
He
Well,
got
I'm
off
just
lucky.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do. Dan is very passionate about the work he does, but it would not hurt to make us look a little thinner here and there. So it is my turn to introduce Michael Sherman. Michael Sherman is the one of the latest additions to our staff. And when I heard that Michael Sherman was going to come on staff, I was overjoyed because I've seen Michael Sherman be part of the FUM community over the years. He was part of the board before he came to the office, and he loves the work that we do at FUM. He is passionate about the work that we are involved in, and he has a heart for the ministries that we have. He is also a father to four kids. The oldest one is 23, and the youngest one is 17. And also married to Kristen Sherman, who he met at Quaker Haven Camp, and has over the years pastor Raysville Friends and then Muncie Friends. And one fun fact is that he shared like 2/3 of the same name with my husband, Michael David J, and then that's also Michael David Sherman. And they have both pastor at Raysville Friends, so sometimes it gets confusing of what Michael we're talking about. But I'll give it to Michael.
Thank you, Carla. Am I successfully sharing my screen?
Yes, you are. We can see.
Okay, thank you. That's not gonna help. I Dan threw us under the bus, and I want to get out from under the bus. Um, I appreciate the challenge that Dan lays out for us for excellence. Yes, sometimes it is annoying, but it is never a bad thing to be held to a standard of quality. And I appreciate that about Dan, is that he is unwavering in his commitment to quality in our communications. I don't know if you are catching the theme for how we are talking about the Richmond office. When we sent out the publication in the e-news, it said, I used a quote from a Canadian radio show, we're not big, but we're small. And I that's what we are highlighting, is that connective relational piece that happens because we are individuals with a specific task and responsibility, and what we do is create relationships. And so Carla mentioned that I've been a pastor. You're going to get a bit of a sermon. Some of you have seen some of this already. It'll be a little bit different because it's a different venue. What Carla emphasized in the Living Letters trips was that each trip is different. Each trip has its own identity. Each trip has its own experiences, and they are never replicated in their entirety. Everything is familiar and different all at the same time. And so those engagements and the engagements with the pictures of FUM require creativity. So creativity belongs to the artist in each of us. To create means to relate. The root meaning of the word art is to fit together, and we all do this every day. That is in large part the interpersonal work of FUM, to fit us together, to build relationships and connections so that we are all operating on the same page and in the same direction. So these quotes are all from a book titled Art and Fear. becoming an artist consists of learning to accept yourself, which makes your work personal, and in following your own voice, which makes your work distinctive. That when we engage in the work of FUM, we are putting ourselves in the process of creating relationships, creating engagement, creating connection. And so it becomes a part of who we are. It becomes flavored as the individual. That a living letters trip with Carla on it is different than a living letters trip with Max Carter to the one to Ramallah. I've been on living letters trips with Linda Garrison and Carla, and they are different things because the artist, the person who is doing the creative work, is a different person. And they become distinctive. They become our own because we are engaged in doing that work ourselves. All you can work on today is directly in front of you. Your job is to develop an imagination of the possible. I don't know if it's just me or everybody is getting similar things, but the one of the consistent ads that keeps popping up when I'm interacting with the world is managing your not-for-profit becoming too chaotic. And that's something that comes up over and over, that dynamic, that thread. And apparently, this is a really difficult time for not-for-profits in the world. We live with the chaos of a government that is unpredictable and unsteady, and it can be daunting to look at the landscape and think about the future, think about direction. One of the things that we are doing at FUM is trying to create an imagination of the possible so that we can think about a group of aging churches in North America who are coming together to do dynamic, wonderful things all across the world, not just in places that aren't North America, but also in places that are our own places here in North America. Making art provides uncomfortably accurate feedback about the gap that inevitably exists between what you intended to do and what you did. Your job is to learn to work on your work. So the other day in the office, we were talking about the layout in the hallway. My office is completely segregated from everybody else, and they won't tell me why. I've been put in timeout, but I'm all by myself. And somebody was saying if they had their druthers that they would move across the hall from me. And I said, but then you could see me napping in there. And the response that came back was, well, I didn't want to see you anyway. And so you get this uncomfortable gap between what you intended, because she didn't intend to say that. What she wanted to say was would be moving offices, not for the purpose of keeping tabs on what I'm doing, but for different reasons. So making art provides an uncomfortably accurate feedback about the gap that inevitably exists between what you intended to do and what you did. When we are invested in relationship with one another, we are building the kingdom of God together. And the building comes when we recognize that what's happening is not what we intended and that we can do better. How can I build love, joy, hope, peace, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control in this moment? The lessons that you are meant to learn are in your work. To see them, you need to only look at the work clearly, without judgment, without need or fear, without wishes or hopes, without emotional expectations. Ask your work what it needs, not what you need, and then set aside your fears and listen. As a pastor, my mother was a pastor. My grandfather, her father was a pastor. And so I learned to ask my mother for help when I needed it. And the most frequent thing she would say to me when I was up against something frustrating, she would say, "Have you prayed about it?" And it was annoyingly helpful advice that when I stopped and took a step back and asked God for direction, asked God for guidance, asked the moment for what it needed, what was going on, and was unafraid of the answer, it showed itself to me what the work needed. Did it need reassurance? Did it need comfort? Did it need leadership? Did it need guidance? Did it need hunting? Did we need to stop and try something completely different because this was never going to work? What is important about each new piece of art is not whether it is better or worse than your previous efforts, but the ways in which it is similar or different. Each of the pictures that Dan showed you that showed a lineage of someone's experience over the last 20 years at FUM is not important because the person is the same. It's important because that person has changed and grown and moved. That when we interact with one another, what's important is that we are moving and growing and changing. And we can do that at FUM because we are a small, intimate group of folks. In making art, you need to give yourself room to respond authentically, both to your subject matter and to your materials. Art happens between you and something, a subject, an idea, a technique, and both you and that something need to be free to move. When we do the work of FUM, we are creating relationships, and those relationships have to be free to be what they are. We have to be free to be who we are as we engage. When we go in, and Kelly likes to say this, if you go to Belize and you're expecting North American behavior and policy, you will be sadly disappointed because that's not what's there. The work in Belize is distinctly Belizean, and you have to learn to work in that environment. What good teachers offer their students is something akin to the vulnerability found in a personal relationship, a kind of artistic and intellectual intimacy that lets others see how they reached at a specific point, not simply that they did reach it. It is the willingness to lay open the line that runs between their life and their art that gives meaning to the technique and empowerment to artistic goals that for the student may still lie many years distant. Learning is the natural reward of meetings with remarkable ideas and remarkable people. That's a lot of words to say that one of the things that is most valuable in building relationships is that you notice and find that the reality of an individual is that they are growing and changing and they're not finished. You have a choice, or miraculously a rolling tangle of choices between giving your work your best shot and risking that it will not make you happy, or not giving your best shot and thereby guaranteeing that it will not make you happy. It becomes a choice between certainty and uncertainty, and curiously, uncertainty is the comforting choice. Oh, goodness. The cat started running the computer. All that said to say that what we do in the Richmond office is put ourselves in front of the work and engage with it in a way that we intend to be delightful, productive, truthful, informative, and engaged. And it isn't always perfect. I found a typo in an e-news a couple months ago, and I said, Dan, do you want to know there was a typo? And he said, not after I sent it out. So do you have any questions for the three of us? I have lots of questions for Dan about proper sheep management, but we can save those for later.
And we make a living letter trip to Dan's ranch, sheep ranch.
You'll have to talk to Dan about that.
On the line.
I will have to ask the sheep how they feel. No, they feel different ways about it, but there was one time when a person was driving by, they were grandparents and they had their 3-year-old grandson with them, and he really wanted to see the sheep, and he came up to the front to the front yard fence, and the sheep came up to him and let him pet them. And then there are other times when people come by or they meet other people and they run away. So it really is up to them in a way.
So who are your other two staff people? I think we've met three and talked about the fourth one.
In the office is Kelly Kellum, General Secretary of FUM, who you've met. Their finance director, Kira Young, she's the one who works the numbers and keeps us financially fit. And then Catherine Coons is our office manager, and she's the one who's really in charge. If if you ask, she's the one who gives us our marching orders most days. When Catherine presented to the board for the first time, she said, I don't make anything, I don't do anything, I don't produce anything, I don't write anything. And so, but she is the one who keeps us in line. Lamont, can you restate that question?
I've been struggling with the wording. I have been with Friends United meeting on several occasions in several countries, and I'm trying to give words to the change that I have felt when I have been, and yet it wasn't in any of those living letter trips. It was more in either a triennial, such as 2002 in Kenya, or a larger Quaker gathering, or a very small, intimate work prior to the conference on 3 sites when I was in Belize. I'm trying to ask how others reflect or show how they have changed when they have been in the midst of other kindred spirits abroad.
I'll talk for a little bit about that, and if either Dan, Carla, or you or Carla have something to add, feel free. My first experience with FUM outside of North America was on a trip to Cuba in 2014, in conjunction with work that ESR was doing at the Peace Institute in Ibarra. And Cuba is a very different place than the United States. And it would be very easy to say, if it's like Jack Spratton and his who could eat no fat and his wife who could eat no lean, that they could just figure out how to share the resources, they could become healthy individuals. And so you look at Cuba and you think that, and I think somewhat shallowly, if they just had more money, they would be better off. And if you conversely looked at the United States and said, if we just had a little less money, we would be better off. And it's not quite that thing that so one of the things I learned is that Cubans don't see themselves as poor. They don't see themselves as impoverished. They might know that they are going through difficult things, but they see richness differently. They see community differently. And so in that same line, I have a family of Afghan immigrants who came over when we exited Afghanistan in 21. And they teach me about hospitality in that same way. So I can talk about how I have experienced change. I'm a much kinder, healthier, grown-up person because I have been in exchange with folks who are different than I am. I'm 6'6". Carla, you're what, 5'1", 5 foot tall? When we look down the hallway, we don't see the same things, but that doesn't mean Carla's perspective is not as valuable. It may not be as heightened as mine, but it's still valuable. And those are the ways in which I've experienced change. It's about engaging in relationship.
I think that one of the things that I have seen when I've traveled for FUM is and I don't know if it would be like this if I were not an American, but as an American, with sufficient resources to feel that I can control what my day is going to be like, and that I can make plans and largely follow them through, it really puts you in a different life location to have to not have the knowledge to do that, to not have the language skills to do that, to not know how things work to be able to do that. So, in almost every place that I've traveled for FUM, there has been some question about how to make the bathrooms work. Certainly in Cuba, certainly in Kenya. Sometimes you need help even to identify what qualifies as a bathroom. So there's often an issue of the water supply. If you find a toilet, will there be water in the toilet? If there's not water in the toilet, what are you supposed to do with the toilet? If there's a toilet and there's water, are you supposed to put the toilet tissue in the toilet, or is that going to break the entire plumbing system and you should never do it? So there is that. There's the fact that we basically have no control over the geography of where we are, of how to get from one place to another. When I went to Ramallah, it was a huge burden to everyone who was traveling with me that I have a deathly allergy to sesame in any form, including sesame seeds and sesame oil. And Middle Eastern cooking is uh, it just has sesame everywhere. Sesame oil, tahini, sesame seeds. And for a large part of the time that I was staying near Ramallah Friends School, the staff of the school actually cooked for me because they did not feel that uh, that I could eat any of the meals that were prepared for the students. They just didn't want to take the chance. And then when we would go out to eat, the headmaster of the school had the staff who could speak Arabic print up a laminated card for me that said, "This man cannot have any sesame or he will die." And so I had this card to show. But in addition, we often went with the headmaster's wife, and she would take the card and show it to the waiter, and then she would make a choking gesture around her neck, and her head would keel over dramatically, and her tongue would stick out so that everyone knew that if there was any sesame in anything I ate, I might die. But it's so I think this is why I haven't been allowed to go back to Ramallah, actually, or perhaps why I haven't gone, but because it was such a huge burden for people, but also just such an incredible grace to know that people were so worried and that they were always concerned that something would happen to me. And it's not the kind of way that I would ordinarily go through my days. I mean, ordinarily I would feel that I was in control. And when I travel with Living Letters trips, I'm never in control. I don't really know where I am. I don't know what food I'm eating. I don't know where to get water, and I don't know how to use the bathroom. So, that's kind of transformative.
That's a really crappy illustration, Dan, but thank you.
So I'll just say a quick story about how it's transformed my perspective or worldview. The first time I went to Kenya, I learned about polygamy, and I was talking to one of the wives, and I kind of had the comment like how terrible it would be to be like in a polygamy family arrangement, and one of the wives said, "Why?" When we are able to pull resources together, like if we didn't have polygamy, then some of the families would not be able to survive. And I just never thought about that before. I've with my Western understanding of marriage, but at the same time, when there are women that spend their lives walking to get water, um, who would do the cleaning, who would look after the children, and it just made me think twice before, judging. Wasn't trying to judge, but judging uh, other family arrangements, and um, it completely transformed me of how that family arrangement would be a way for women to support each other while trying to raise a family.